It's 5 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Monday morning. Nice looking Monday. We got some cool temperatures moving in, by the way, after today. 76 degrees. If you're listening in the north, you're saying, that's not cool, that's warm. Well, it is in Florida. 76 tomorrow, I think is what they're saying. Michael Z. Williamson is on the phone. He retired from the United States Air Force. He's a disaster preparedness expert. He is an historical reenactor. He forges blades, which is, I think, Robin's favorite part of his credentials. He's a parachutist. I could never do that. He rants at the political, social, and moral state of the world. Well, he should be a radio show hosting. And he's got a couple of books he wants to talk to us about his own, which he is a very prolific writer, and also Battlefield Earth.
He's awesome.
The audiobook, I think, is part of what we're talking about.
Yep, he's absolutely awesome.
And I'm a fan of that, by the way, and I've listened to the whole thing. It took me about 48 years to listen to it. Mm-hmm. No, 48 hours to listen to
48 hours.
But it took me, I was listening to it probably for a few months, because I would listen to it to and from work. And you know what? Ever since I've finished it, I can drive down those roads and still think about that story. It's like there's a psychological thing built into my brain when I drive down those roads. Michael Z. Williamson, good morning, sir.
I'm doing good. Woke up a bit late, but I'm here.
Where are you? Where are you calling from?
Indianapolis. I'm in the same time zone.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Okay, all right. And thank you for being on the air with us today.
Oh, good to be here.
How far back do you go? Were you one of the writers in the Writers of the Future competition, or is that before or after your time? It seems like you've been writing forever.
Well, that's been going longer than I've been going. I was never involved with that. I've met them several times at events. They're good people. I sold my first novel in 2002.
Oh, wow. And you've got so many books that you've written. So when you are talking to people like us about your influences, does L. Ron Hubbard's name come up?
Not as a large influence per se, but regarding Battlefield Earth and a couple of others, I've read those repeatedly. I liked the pace, the writing style. They're very entertaining. I read those actually. That came out when I was in my first couple of years of service, active duty. Uh-huh. And he said he was trying to recapture the pulp feel of the 50s science fiction, which I'm a huge fan of.
Right, yes.
And it worked. Yeah.
The one thing I thought with Battlefield Earth was that the title seemed to be reflected in the first half more so from a typical battle. And the second half of the book almost seemed like it was a metaphor for, or not a metaphor, I mean, it's a real battle that goes on between our wits, between our minds, between politics. It seemed like the battle became a more in-depth kind of a subject rather than the simplified version of guns and weapons.
Right. Well, any war is going to involve both political and physical attributes.
And you like to talk about the survivalist philosophy that comes about between actually surviving disasters in real life and the way the authors write them in their books.
And the way they're portrayed on TV and the way people actually respond. Of course, you get a lot of hurricanes down there. I just heard from a friend of mine in Dublin, Ireland, and they're about to get their second hurricane ever.
Wow. When was the first one? Yeah, I said to Robin this morning, I don't think I've ever heard of a hurricane hitting that area. How long ago was the first one?
I don't know. I have to look it up. Quite a few years, I imagine.
Oh, okay. So you know what we hear, though, because we speak to a lot of authors, is that the people who were in shelters during our hurricane, which was Irma, back in the beginning of September, they were actually reading some of the books that they heard us talking about. I'm sure Battlefield Earth came up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and some of my fans have said they keep mine either on a tablet or in paper copies for when they're hunkering down.
But is it? I mean, do you think? I don't know. I guess if we use books or as a distraction from whatever's going on around us, or maybe as a way, like Robin and I have taken a train ride in November.
Yes.
It's 19 hours long. I've never done this before, so I'm wondering if I'm going to go stir crazy. I think a book would distract me from all of that.
That's a good use for them. Yeah, I always carried a book with me when I was doing any kind of military exercise because we would sit around for hours waiting for something to happen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And so how did you get in? How did you go from the military? Which, by the way, thank you for your service. How did you go from that to becoming an author? Were you influenced by those books you were carrying around while you were waiting for duty?
So the standard response is I can quit anytime I want to. I started writing when I was 8. When I was a teenager,
Wow.
I had a amazing hit rate on letters to the editor. I'd get 70 or 80% of them published, both newspapers and magazines.
That's amazing.
Sold some short stuff, some firearm-related stuff, and some disaster-related stuff in my late 20s. And then I wasn't earning much money, but I was an established professional, and I was talking about... I had a novel mostly finished, which I was talking about on the forum for Bain Books, and the publisher said, well, go ahead and send me your first chapter, and I'll take a look at it.
Well, let me just tell the audience this. As far as I can tell, your newest book is called Forged in Blood. Is that correct? Is that your newest?
That's the new one, yes.
And you've got 51 customer reviews on Amazon, and 98% of them are 5-star, and a couple of knuckleheads, 2% of them gave you a 4-star. That's because
one guy didn't quite get Colonel Tom Kratman's story. He's a retired infantry officer, and about well, you can't take a sword against tanks. Well, the guy's insane, and he's talking to his sword while he uses grenades against tanks. That's
there you go.
Wow.
There you go. Since you are a historical reenactor, do you find a lot of similarities between history up till now and about the stories that are written in the sci-fi genre in the future?
Some things never change. I've seen a Mayan codex, and I've seen an ancient Greek script, both talking about how horrible it is that young people are disrespecting their elders, wearing makeup, and hanging out in the marketplace.
That's funny. Yeah, well, that's what happens. I think the world just keeps repeating itself over and over again.
Yeah, I do Viking era a lot, and yeah, there's a lot of things that constantly repeat in history, both as fiction and as reality. A few years ago, they found, if you ever saw Monty Python's Dead Parrot sketch, they found an ancient Greek play that was a comedy. It was the Dead Slave sketch. It was the same motif done with a dead slave instead of a dead parrot.
Oh my gosh.
No.
Oh my gosh.
Oh no.
Wow.
When you're writing an anthology, are you aware that you're writing an anthology, or is it just like photographs that you put in an album? All of a sudden, they all work together.
Well, that's a collection versus an anthology. My collections are just stuff I've compiled writing for other universes or solo. The anthology, this one specifically, I wrote a timeline. I laid out where I wanted particular episodes, and then I contacted other authors and said, can you do this one, or do you want one of these that's open? Where do you want to write in the universe? And they each.
I see. I didn't realize that. Okay, now I get a better understanding of what this is. Okay, so this is one story told by many authors.
Right, and not all anthologies are like that, but this one.
This one is. Well, that's a cool idea. Now, how did you find the authors for your anthology?
Most of them already. Larry Correa is an international bestseller. He came along later than I did, and he's got dozens of times more sales than I do. He's such a nice guy, I can't hate him for it.
Healthy hatred, I like that.
Yeah, Tom Kratman writes for Bain. Tony Daniel is both a writer for Bain and he's my editor. And then several of the others have written short fiction for other collections. And other writers said, you should take a look at their stuff and see what you think. And quite a few of them are military.
Do you embrace editing? I mean, from editing from somebody else other than yourself? Is it a good thing?
It's always good to have outside eyes on a project. It helps you, catch things that you would otherwise miss. If an editor says to me, "You need to expand this because it's exciting, give it more words, and this is confusing, I need you to clarify, and this really doesn't advance the plots," I'm really relatively easy about making changes like that.
Do you have a critical eye when it comes to science fiction as opposed to just fiction? By critical eye, I mean, do you like you could have a good story, but didn't have any real look toward the future kind of an aspect to it, and I wondered if that was an important part of it for you.
The science is, there's some stuff I see where the story is so good and the science is so bad that it's hard to take it seriously. I was when I was young, because I grew up in Britain, I was a big fan of the British show UFO. And they alternate between completely brilliant science from 1970, very, forthright stuff that we haven't even got to yet, but is still theoretical, and then they would go with complete ridiculous garbage like aliens who were invading Earth to steal our organs.
Yeah.
And there are so many, throughout history, wars have been going on our planet, and people have speculated as to how a war would go with aliens. Do you think Battlefield Earth did a good job? That L. Ron Hubbard was a good writer to depict this scenario?
Given the scenario, it actually worked well. I've consulted for TV shows for Discovery and Science Channel and also National Geographic on alien invasion. And it's really hard to conduct a war across interstellar distances, and there's really not a whole lot of reason to. But the concept in the book is that they're literally mining the entire crust of a planet for resources. And if you're able to operate on that kind of scale, it does make sense, to find planets and exploit them. And if you've got that kind of technology, you're sophisticated enough, you really don't care about the natives. They're just in your way.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Do you know there was part of the Battlefield Earth book I wanted to ask you about. Well, let me say this first of all. A lot of people will point to Star Trek and say, "Look, they predicted the cell phone because they showed people with little phones." But in Star Trek, they never showed apps. They just showed. But there was one thing in Battlefield Earth that the Cyclos, was that the other planet?
Yes.
Cyclos? Okay, they had a metal pill or something embedded in their brain, and that metal pill actually controlled the brain, right, of the person,
right,
of the cyclo with it in it. Well, did you happen to see a story? And I had to Google it so I could get it for you. It was October 11th, 2017. That's 5 days ago. Listen to this story. Entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley this year set themselves an audacious new goal: create a brain-reading device that would allow people to send texts with their thoughts. Are you ready for this? And they did a test, and they were able to read a bird's brain and predict its next song.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
And it is a pill. I mean, it looks exactly the same. Well, when I picked it, when I heard the book, because I listened to it, I didn't read it. But I pictured the exact same thing, a little metallic-looking pill.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a friend who's a neuroscientist, and when you read articles like that, he's probably involved with them. He's done neural prostheses for memory, is something they're working on for people who've suffered traumatic brain injuries, and neural interfaces between the body and a prosthetic limb. So I hear about stuff like this. Yeah, my running joke is, this all ends with Skynet.
Yeah, that was a good thought-provoking movie with Sandra Bullock. That was pretty cool. I thought it was very clever. Very clever.
But, you really don't want to be... There's limits on how much technology we want to be interacting with and how much control we want to be giving anything other than ourselves.
Yeah, it was interesting how toward the end, I don't want to give the book away, but toward the end, how in Battlefield Earth had the battle was a financial battle. Who's going to owe who money?
Well, that's to an extent that's true in any war. I was Air Force engineer units. And the primary mission during the Cold War was we were supposed to repair runways that got bomb damaged so that we could get aircraft back in the air. We could spend money fixing the runways, faster than the enemy could bomb the runways. You're going to grade, patch, and go back to relaunching aircraft. And if they bomb it again, you grade, patch, and relaunch. And how many times can they bomb us, and how fast can we repair it?
And that's and that's one thing that happens in the disaster preparedness. I mean, sometimes people say, "Oh well, you don't have to give us all this warnings. We'll be able to survive and get water and everything." But in the books, how relatable is that? Is that some of the characters are the same way, others are totally prepared, and the other characters are not, and then that's a problem. There's where the conflict is.
Right. You don't, and you can't really over-prepare if you have the means to do so, although it reaches a point where you can get relatively ridiculous. I mean, I'm in Indiana, so I don't worry about hurricanes. You probably don't worry about ice storms.
Right.
Not too much, no.
But you have to prepare for those.
No, but it's going to be 76 degrees tomorrow.
Yeah. But back in July, my house here, we had a lightning strike literally a few feet away that damaged equipment. The week after that, we had a funnel cloud come over the hill and snap two of our trees.
Oh, no.
And touch down across the highway. And then the week after that, we had so much rain that even though we're on a hill, the lower level of the house flooded. So you can have lots of disasters hit one after another, and you can have a cascade effect.
And that has to be very inspirational to you as a writer. I mean, you probably put it in the back of your mind for the next story that you come up with.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Stuff like that will at some point find its way into print.
I have a friend who is he's writing screenplay. I say he's a screenwriter, he is, but he hasn't had any movies made yet. So anyway, so he shared with me a letter he got back from one of the potential whoever you send those things to, and it was very, very constructive and very, very complimentary, but had some specific things that he said would make the screenplay better. And so I was talking to my friend about, actually it was an email exchange, and I said to him, gosh, this sounds like a good one. I would take this as optimistic, because we had an author from the Writers of the Future contest, and he said he was rejected, had some positive, constructive feedback, even though he was rejected, changed a little piece in the book, and then it was accepted.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've learned from speaking to many of the people with the Writers of the Future contest is that when you get that kind of feedback, it helps everybody. Did you have that early in your career, and do you still have it now?
I had a story that I'd written, short story, that never got published, got multiply rejected, and then John Ringo, another best-selling author, put together an anthology called Citizens, where all the stories were written by veterans. And I went back and revisited that story, and I basically gutted 2/3 of it and rewrote it. And it turned out to be a really good story. I had the great concept, I just didn't have the chops to deliver on it when I first wrote it.
Is that right? Wow. We've had him on the show, but we've had John on the show.
Yeah.
I just like saying his name.
Scuba diving down there.
I just like saying his name, John Ringo, because I like to say it the way.
And that's his real name. That is not a pen name. That is his real name.
Really? Oh, yes. that I never knew.
He is a distant relative of Johnny Ringo.
Oh, yeah, the gunfighter.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, isn't that something? Well, since you have been stationed in other countries around the world, how do you manage to keep your military experiences out of some of the stories that you write?
Oh, no, those go in.
Oh, they all go in.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. It actually wasn't particularly military in nature. I actually wrote most of one novel while I was deployed.
My gosh.
That was frustrating and stress relieving at the same time.
Michael Z. Williamson is who you're listening to. He's our guest. He's talking about his work as an author, a science fiction writer, Battlefield Earth audiobook, which is part of the Writers of the Future. It's not part of that, really. It's part of Galaxy Press, I should say. But
yes.
Writers of the Future is something we've promoted a lot on this show. And the reason I bring it up is simple. We have in our listening audience many people who are interested in being authors and who are authors. And if you're a science fiction author, if you're an author of that genre, take my advice. Go to the writers. What is it called? WritersOfTheFuture.com. Submit your work. They do it every 3 months, every quarter, and you might be rejected 5, 6, 7 times or more. But then eventually you'll get one in there, and it's a great way to catapult a career that you're hoping for. Have you met any of the people?
I've met Galaxy Press people quite a few times at LA conventions, and they've had a really good success rate in finding authors who've then gone on to big careers. Yeah. And as far as you mentioned rejections, I'm friends with Kevin J. Anderson, who's done a lot of the Dune books and some of the Star Wars books, among others. He's written hundreds of books.
We've had him on too.
He claims he's got a 6.5 foot tall stack of rejection letters.
Oh!
Wow,
that's amazing.
Wow. And that's very inspirational to the people out there, because sometimes a person gets so frustrated by being rejected that they feel they're not any good at all, and why should they pursue it? But that statement proves them wrong.
Yeah, I got rejected over and over again, and then all of a sudden Jim Bain said, well, send me your first chapter, I'll take a look at it. Send me the second chapter. Send me the third. Send me the rest of the book. And like a year later, when he had time interspersed to read, and he said, all right, I'll send you a contract.
Wow. So what do you think it is? Do you think that the writers actually get better, or do you think that the publishers just aren't really seeing it for what it's worth?
Usually the former, occasionally the latter. But lots of common problems with new writers, and I see it with people who've been sending me stuff for anthologies. They're over-detailing stuff. You see, assuming the prose is good, they over-detail stuff, they dwell too much on small things, and it gets wordier than it should do and has less punch than it needs.
So when you're forging blades, do you have a particular design in mind, and then does that lead to another sci-fi character that might have that type of weapon?
I suppose it could. I usually do historical stuff, and occasionally, frequently I'll be hammering on something and it doesn't turn out how I expected, and I'll have to keep beating on it and turn it into something else, and I'm muttering to myself, the Viking Smith was somewhere out there laughing at me.
I told Robin this morning I was going to compete with you and go get some cardboard and some aluminum foil and make my own blade. What an exciting career you've had, and thank you for taking some time out of your day to be with us today, Michael. Let's see.
Absolutely.
I found Battlefield Earth and Forged in Blood, both on Amazon, of course.
Yes.
Is there a website you have that you want to direct us to?
Yeah, it's michaelzwilliamson.com.
Okay.
And then my forging site is sharppointythings.com.
Sharppointythings.com.
Oh, sharppointythings.com.
Yes.
Oh, I like that one.
I'm going to look it up.
And don't forget BattlefieldEarth.com, and check out the audiobook, and WritersOfTheFuture.com. We'll kind of make sure we mention all of that so that any authors can maybe perhaps be where you are now one day in the future. Thank you for being on the show with us today, Michael.
Thanks for hosting me.
All right, we will take a little break, and we'll be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accidents. On this Monday, sunshine mixing with clouds. A shower in spots at any time. There can be an afternoon thunderstorm in the area as well. High 86 to 90. Partly to mostly cloudy Monday night with a couple of showers around, mainly later. Low 68 inland, 74 at the coast. For Tuesday, variable cloudiness and not as warm with a shower and thunderstorm or two. It'll become